my name is Asha Sampath and welcome to this new edition of Business Africa, your magazine dedicated to the continent's business and economic news. As usual, you can win $150 in our Business Africa game. More details later, but first, today's top stories. We head for Senegal, where rice farmers are fighting against Asian competition to make local production triumph.
Initially, it is important to establish the best possible relationship between the various parties in order to have a top-quality finished product at a right price.
Growing vegetables in the middle of the desert is possible, and it is also organic. Example with these Malian farmers.
We are in the middle of the desert, and people are growing vegetables like tomatoes and aubergines. A few years ago, you wouldn't have seen that here.
Is your business being threatened? How to manage a conflictual situation? The answer in our Business Law is Your Business series.
The problem may actually be solved quite painlessly compared to a trade tribunal, where proceedings are quite intense, with lawyers going back and forth for something that quite often should be an open and shut case.
Overcoming the competition from Asian rice, this is the priority in Senegal. In this West African country, rice farmers are struggling to sell their produce, but large quantities are still imported. Senegal is also the second largest importer of rice in Africa after Nigeria. How to get out of this gear, our journalist Eric Mounier asked Senegalese farmers the question. Take a look.
West Africa imports more than $2 billion worth of rice each year. 80% of Senegal's rice arrives here at the port of Dakar from Asia and South America. Although locally produced rice is poorer quality, it is much less expensive. But local producers cannot satisfy demand. And yet Senegal's territory is ideally suited, with the Senegal's river enormous delta, providing 250,000 hectares of potential rice paddies. At present, just 25% is used for that purpose. Most are small-scale family plots.
I've divided my land into 3 parts, with different varieties of rice on each one. They don't have the same characteristics. 177, for example, has a particular fragrance, and I keep it for my own use. I sell the other varieties on the market.
Like Mr. Diop, most farmers keep half their crops for personal consumption and sell the other half. The unmilled rice, or paddy, is harvested before being processed. The growers remove the outer husk of the rice and then the grains are polished. The rice is now ready for consumption. For every 100 kilos of harvested rice, 66 kilos are left after the various stages of processing. Senegalese producers provide just 150,000 tons of rice for sale on the markets, well below national consumption, estimated to be over 600,000 tons. In 2008, the Senegalese state launched a vast program to develop the delta and increase rice production.
The target is to have at least 1 million tons of white rice. That's 1.5 million paddy fields for the whole of Senegal. The valley alone will produce 950,000 tons.
Rice cultivation requires a lot of water, and increasing production areas means a vast amount of irrigation work. This can cost $9 to $10,000 a hectare and is covered by the Senegalese government. The government also receives financial support from financial backers such as the French Development Agency. This is how the irrigation work on this 2,500 hectare area of land is being funded. Once ready, the land is then shared out amongst private farmers.
We divide the land into plots of 5 to 50 hectares that are then attributed following a competitive procedure that evaluates the candidate's potential to become private farmers and their ability to develop their activity profitably.
The switch from a family-based artisan approach to a more profitable mode of production demands new marketing methods. With no pre-harvest agreement, the producers are totally dependent on supply and demand and have no protection against a sudden drop in commodity prices due to events such as surplus production. Rice marketing is also affected by this lack of coordination. 400 kilometers away in Dakar, the Sencom company is one of the 5 leading importers of rice. A few years ago, the company's director decided to market locally produced rice. The project failed because there was simply not enough rice available.
Quality was key for us. We imposed standards and the factory respected them. They had the equipment they needed, but the problem was the supply. We couldn't even produce 1,000 tons on the entire year. It was pretty discouraging.
One of the major drives in the rice sector was to establish an organization that would enable producers to reach a common agreement before the harvests. It was an attempt to ensure greater coherence between supply and sales.
Initially, it is important to establish the best possible relationship between the various parties in order to have a top-quality finished product at a right price. If the sector works, all of the parties stand to gain. If the price for the finished product is appropriate, everybody wins.
This interprofessional organization would cover producers, wholesale importers, local tradesmen and rice growers. And Dakar's markets would certainly be adequately supplied. On the market stalls, local rice would hold its own against Asian rice. And Senegal's shoppers would have the final word.
It's imported rice, and it's good. I get it every time for myself and my parents. A lot of people buy imported rice, but in my opinion, the local rice is cheaper and better. Before, I only bought imported rice, but now I buy local produce. I think it's better, and people say it's better for you if you are diabetic, because it has less sugar than imported rice.
Senegal's rice sector is entering a new era with better quality varieties and greater interprofessional organization. But these measures come at a cost, and that could impact the market rates for rice. The sector's players will need to join ranks if they are to compete with Asian imports. The survival of the sector is at stake.
Will there really be universal access to vaccines and treatments against COVID-19? It's a growing concern. According to the World Health Organization, the WHO, the ACT accelerator that underpins the COVAX universal vaccine access system requires billions of dollars in emergency funds. And meanwhile, the continent is busy. The South African pharmaceutical company Aspen has reached an agreement with the American Johnson & Johnson to produce a vaccine at its factory in Port Elizabeth. You might remember that the continent was hit by the avian flu in 2016, and today the Cameroonian poultry industry is particularly worried. Outbreaks of avian influenza have recently reappeared in several European countries supplying the country. The government has called for suspending imports of chicks, eggs and other inputs from European countries currently on high alert, raising fears of soaring prices and a shortage of eggs and chicken. No more chemical fertilizers and other complex irrigation systems used by Malian farmers. Indeed, they have succeeded in growing 100% natural vegetables in the middle of the desert. Even if organic areas still only represent 0.2% of the continent's agricultural area, the example shows that organic farming in Africa is possible everywhere. Report by Ariski Ben Mokhtar and Adrien Bizieux.
The tomatoes these men are picking so carefully are no ordinary tomatoes. They are organic. This new approach to farming is quite literally taking root in Africa. No chemical products are used on these plots of land in the desert.
We are in the middle of the desert, and people are growing vegetables like tomatoes and aubergines. A few years ago, you wouldn't have seen that here.
Organic farming is the ideal solution for these farmers concerned about their own health and the health of the soils that nourish them. These small plots of land are a sustainable investment and one they intend to develop in the near future. Their determination is their key asset, as are these precious tomato seeds. The seeds are painstakingly selected and stored before being analyzed by agronomists and replanted. They are a treasure the farmers guard jealously.
We select the varieties that are the most resistant to the climates and to certain diseases. Then, we tell our partners which seeds we have chosen so they can be duplicated and delivered.
More and more African farmers are turning their hands to organic production. Although the trend is far less developed than in many northern countries, Africa is making inroads into this new territory. What's more, this type of production is perfectly suited to small-scale producers. Traditional agriculture in Africa is organic by its very nature, as no chemical fertilizers are used.
5 years from now, I would like to see all of Africa switching to organic farming methods and stop using chemical fertilizers that damage the soil and are harmful for humans and livestock. There are lots of issues at stake, and it would be good to see everybody aiming for a self-sufficient food supply by adopting organic methods.
Despite the climatic obstacles and the lack of resources, these pioneers of organic farming in the desert are not giving in.
As for the problem, well, we don't have enough water and the hot, dusty Harmattan winds blow every day. We need backing from outside partners to install more wells here, and we need to stem the exodus so we have enough hands to farm the 5 hectares. We are certain that with these 5 hectares, we'll be financially independent in a few years' time.
Although still in its infancy, African organic farming is starting to attract the attention of agricultural development aid institutions. The French Development Agency is showing particular interest.
There is an opportunity for certain African countries to sell tropical produce under the organic label. This is all the more true as countries that have been producing perennial crops such as coconuts have been farming organically without even being aware of it. I think there is a market, even though there are not yet any guidelines. The advantage with Europe is that we have the guidelines as well as the demand for organic produce.
Furthermore, Jean-Luc Francois also believes that participation by regional and local banks is indispensable for greater development of organic farming and of agriculture in general.
There can be no agricultural development without financial services for agriculture. There is a growing debate about the issue, and we think this is an encouraging sign. Major banks present on the continent are asking certain questions. Are we doing all we can for our farming clientele? There is an emulation between banks, and more thought is being given to asking how we can best serve agriculture, a sector which is naturally risky. That is why the AFD is thinking hard about the question of risk management.
Here in the desert, exporting is not an issue, or not yet. But in other regions on the continent where the climate is more clement, namely in East African nations such as Tanzania, Uganda and Ethiopia, not to mention South Africa, large-scale organic farms are increasingly common. Almost 180,000 hectares have already obtained the official organic label, namely for land dedicated to perennial crops like coffee, cotton, palm oil and cocoa. The sector now provides a livelihood for more than 500,000 small-holding farmers. Other producers are still waiting for the official label that is yet to comply with very strict European Union norms. This certification is indispensable for farmers intending to export their produce to Europe. Several organizations have set up support programs to promote the process. The Food and Agricultural Organization launched a $2.4 million program with German financial backing. It remains to be seen how much of the future organic farming will have in Africa. One thing the experts agree on is that the choice of this type of agriculture will boost the continent's food production capacity and reduce its dependency on foreign countries.
Welcome back to the second part of our show. The issue of debt restructuring is more topical than ever, so much that the G20 has put in place a new framework to deal with restructuring. This is a case-by-case settlement with the assistance of the World Bank and the IMF, and including a broad association of creditors, including private ones. The idea is, of course, to involve China, which has 60% of the bilateral debt of poor countries to be repaid before the end of the year. But civil society, represented by the NGO Jubilee Debt Campaign, described the system as very insufficient to prevent defaults. Let me now turn to Durban in South Africa, where an extraordinary summit of the African Union has just ended. The virtual meeting reviewed the modalities of the application of the African Continental Free Trade Area Treaty. This agreement is crucial for the continent's trade as it provides for the elimination of most tariff barriers on January 1st, 2021. Is Africa ready? To answer this question, I'm joined by Trudy Hartzenberg, Executive Director of TRALAC, the Trade Law Centre. Hello, and thank you for joining me on Business Africa to talk about the Durban Summit. What were the main achievements of the summit?
The main aim of the summit was to confirm that trade will start under the AfCFTA regime on the 1st of January 2021. And indeed, according to the press release from the African Union, we know that the heads of state and government have confirmed that trade under the AfCFTA, trade in goods, will start on the 1st of January. What they have also decided is that they know that there will still be ongoing negotiations on tariff reductions, and that these will then be conducted next year until June. They have also decided that for trade in services, the sector commitments for the 5 priority services sectors, financial services, communication, transport, tourism, and professional services, will also be concluded by June next year.
What about the remaining issues?
The remaining issues for trade to begin on the 1st of January are, as the heads of state have agreed, the tariff negotiations, rules of origin negotiations, but then very importantly, for the member states that have ratified the agreement to implement processes domestically. So they have to change the tariff book. They have to implement new certificates of origin, supplier declarations, administrative documents, and standards documents. So this will be what the member states that have ratified the agreement are very busy with now. I think it is also important to note that right now, 34 member states of the African Union have ratified the agreement, and that includes the big economies on the continent, South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, Kenya, and others.
Trudy Hartzenberger, thank you very much. Not all imports are welcome in Africa. That is what emerges from a hazardous waste container scandal in Tunisia. This involves 120 tons of waste, including hospital waste, which must be returned to Italy, their point of departure. Several African countries continue to be the target of this hazardous waste trade. In June 2020, 34 people were arrested in Spain for attempting to fraudulently export 2,500 tons of electronic waste to 8 African countries, including Nigeria. Poorly executed work, inclement weather, late delivery, non-payment, all these problems can lead to a conflict with a business partner. What to do in this case? Before going to court, there are avenues for conciliation and dialogue. We meet David Chiombiano for practical advice in this third report in our series, Business Law is Your Business. Take a look.
The life of a business is not always plain sailing. It is often more of a storm at sea, jumping from one project to another and from one site to another. Then, of course, there is the question of contracts.
Il peut se faire qu'il y ait des problèmes.
The contact may be dogged by problems arising from questions of interpretation, comprehension, or execution.
Soit d'exécution
When that happens, we may be heading for a breach of contract.
Sadou Diallo has seen businesses struggle with public contracts. While many complete the work successfully, others flounder for one reason or another, and in the worst-case scenario cannot finish the work they have begun. The public authority concerned has little choice but to terminate the contract.
I've had to cancel. We tried to find a working solution with the companies, but it wasn't possible, and we had to cancel. We launched a call for tender to continue the work with other companies.
A failure to respect contractual obligations can have huge implications and be prejudicial for the other party. When seeking damages, the parties concerned may well have to go to court to settle their differences. This, in itself, is a complicated procedure where a case can be lost for the slightest technicality, which is why you will need a lawyer. The judge is called on to interpret the law as he sees fit in the circumstances. At the end of the day, there is, of course, a winner and a loser.
Sometimes, even when the ruling has been pronounced, the litigants are no closer to agreeing with one another. One side has won, the other has lost, but it's not always easy to understand why a case has been ruled against you. If the decision is not adequately explained, the losing party may still refuse to abide by the decision.
But when dealing with commercial conflicts, jaw is better than war, and the tribunal should only be used as a last resort. It is always better to seek dialogue, and this approach is often surprisingly successful.
The problem may actually be solved quite painlessly compared to a trade tribunal, where proceedings are quite intense, with lawyers going back and forth for something that quite often should be an open and shut case. It takes time and can cost a lot of money. I've been a lawyer for 40 years. I've won some cases and lost others. I think the clients would have been happier if we'd taken their case to mediation instead.
Alain Fénéon was recently appointed mediator in a conflict between an African government and a US partner. The state had awarded a contract to exploit a publicly owned hotel. The government in question had expected more revenue from the venture, while the partner had expected the state to pay for infrastructure renovation. Thanks to mediation, the dialogue was re-established between the two parties, and their reciprocal interests prevailed.
It took just over 24 hours to bring the representatives of the two parties together in Paris, and a day and a half to reach an agreement. Now they're working together again, and are quite happy to do so. Mediation deals with the future. The judicial solution deals with the past.
Le médiateur qui vient dans cette mission doit être une tierce personne.
The mediator must be an independent third party and must be seen to be impartial.
Tel qu'on ne puisse pas être amené à croire qu'il joue à l'impartialité. Il doit être neutre.
He or she must be neutral, impartial, and competent.
Aussi, il doit être qualifié. Bien évidemment,
of course, the mediator is there to propose solutions, not to impose a decision.
Des décisions dans le fond.
Several types of dialogue are available to the litigants. There is conciliation, arbitration, and mediation. Centers for conciliation, arbitration, and mediation are available at most chambers of trade. At the highest level, OHADA applies a uniform act that covers arbitration in the 17 member states. However, before taking a case to arbitration, certain conditions must be met.
Il faut que l'investisseur pense au OHADA.
The investor has to have included an OHADA arbitration agreement in his contract beforehand. The first condition is that there must be an arbitration agreement written into the contract. But usually operators in Congo-Brazzaville don't think of including the clause in their contracts.
The United States, the world's leading economic power, is a great believer in pursuing dialogue to solve litigation. 50% of disputes go to mediation, and 80% of mediations lead to an agreement between the parties concerned. Furthermore, 95% of the decisions are upheld. The same remarkable success rates do not apply to decisions taken in trade tribunals. In Africa, English-speaking countries such as Nigeria and Kenya are no strangers to the jaw approach, and Ohada is convinced that promoting mediation as a way of facilitating and accelerating conflict resolution will make it all the more attractive. 8 years after having established an arbitration framework, 17 member states, the organization is busy drawing up a uniform act for mediation. What better way to pay tribute to the ancestral African tradition of discussing thorny questions under the baobab tree?
Well, it's now time to reward our loyal viewers at Business Africa. It's up to you to answer to the following questions. If you're drawn among those who have given the correct answers, you will win $150. This is game number 539, so listen carefully to the 2 questions that follow, and good luck. First question. How many hectares have received the organic label in Africa? 18,000, 100,000, 80,000. Second question. What percentage of commercial disputes go to mediation in the United States? 10%, 50%, or 80%? You know the answers. You can participate now by going to our website, africaonair.com. Answer the questions, fill out your form, and good luck. And of course, don't forget to include your contact details, name, address, telephone, email, and the number of the game you are entering with the answers, of course. This game, for example, is game number 539. The winner will receive $150 as our winner this week. Congratulations, you gave the correct answers to our game number 535. Here are the details. First question. When was the FANAF, the African Insurance Federation under national law, created? Answer: in 1976. Second question. What is the incubator of Carnegie Mellon University CMU in Kigali called? Answer: the Key Lab. That's it. Business Africa is over for today. I'll see you next week, same time, same channel with Initiative Africa. In the meantime, you can catch this program on our website, africaonair.com, and all our social media channels. And feel free to share, like, and comment using the hashtag Business Africa TV show. Take care of yourselves and have a great week. Goodbye.